It's Miss Winship, and I want to welcome you to the wonderful world of Winship videos. Okay, we're going to get started with our next unit. Believe it or not, we're continuing solving quadratics, and this is still going to involve factoring. Do you believe that? So be ready, write down video 3. Even though this is in a new testing unit, we're still going to write down that this is the third video. Okay, before we get started, you can just watch this. You don't have to write anything down. I just want you to remind yourself about factoring and how you factor and perfect squared trinomials. Remember, a long time ago I told you it would be best if you learned it about 6 weeks ago, but if you're just learning it now, better late than never. All right, if we were factoring this problem right here, I noticed that this is a perfect square and the x squared is a perfect square. So I can just factor it as the square of a binomial x plus 4 squared, because 4 squared gives me 16, and when I double the middle, that gives me my 8x. To solve this now, the answer is just going to be -4 because we have two of the same answers. On B, this is a perfect square. X minus 11 squared will give me 121, and add to give me 22. The solution would just be 11. And on C, double check it, but x minus 6 squared. 6 squared is 36, and then double the middle, that gives me -12. So the solution to this is just going to be 6. We're going to use this as our basis for understanding completing the square. So our objective for this video is to learn solving quadratics by complete the square. All right, let's get busy with it. Number one, we have a perfect square trinomial, but I don't know what goes in here, and I have to figure out what goes here to complete the square. So I know that it's going to be something plus something squared, and whatever that squared thing is, when I double the middle, it gives me 12. Well, and instead of thinking of it as doubling the middle, if I were to half the middle, that would give me this number. Half of 12 is 6. Now, can you think of what would go here so that when I squared it, I would get 6 squared, and then double the middle would be 6. I think you figured it out by now. That would be 36. All right, let's try number 2. Now 5 is an odd number, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult. What you're going to end up doing is halving the middle. So I'm going to take -5, divide it by 2, and square it. What I did over here was I took 12 divided by 2, and then I squared it, and that's what gave me that. Now when you take 12 divided by 2, that's the number that's going to go here, and then your 36 goes on the end. So when I do -5 divided by 2, that's the number that's going to go here. Now I have to square the top and the bottom, which is 25 over 4, to figure out what that last number is. This is a little strange, but when you do a few of them, you'll get the hang of it. All right, so this is our plan. To solve quadratic equations in this form. Now notice the C this time is on this side. So for complete the squared, the C goes on the right. Remember, for all of our factoring problems, it always had to equal 0 before we started. So first we're going to complete the square, which is what we just learned. Then we're going to solve by using square roots. Okay, here's our first real problem. Now notice that it's equal to the C, because to complete the square, we have to have the C on the right-hand side. Now my second job is to complete the square. Oops, sorry. My first job is to make sure it's in that form. I said that. My next job is to find b divided by 2 and then square it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write my parentheses, x plus, and do half of 16, which is 8, and 8 squared is going to be 64. So the number I'm going to add to each side here is going to be 64. Okay, that's the complete the square part is going to be 64. So I have x squared plus 16x plus 64 equal, go ahead and add that together, that gives me 49. Now I've already worked this part out over here. That gives me x plus 8 squared equal 49. Now this is kind of the new part. I already factored and simplified. My new part is to take the square root of both sides. This is kind of strange taking the square root of a binomial squared, but it turns out it's pretty easy. You just take the square root of the square, and I'm left with x plus 8 equals, now do you remember when you take the square root of a number, you have to write the plus and the minus 7. Okay, so then I'm going to break this equation into two equations. X plus 8 equal positive 7 and x plus 8 equal negative 7. Now I need to subtract 8 from each side. 7 minus 8 gives me a negative 1. And then if I subtract 8 from each side here, I have negative 7 and negative 8, which is negative 15. Now this is kind of strange, but you are going to follow the same exact formula every single time. You always take half of the 16 and then square it. That gives you your end number. You take the square root of each side. You have to put your plus or minus, and then you write two equations and you solve your two equations. Let's have some more fun. Okay, go ahead and write this one down. And our first step is to put this in x squared plus bx equals c. So what I'm going to have to do is take this negative 6 and move it to the other side. So the negative 6 becomes positive 6. Now when I do that, I usually go ahead and leave a blank as I complete the square. All right, now I'm going to use my complete the square capabilities here. Half of 4 is 2, so I'm going to write that 2 down here. Then I need to square the 2, which gives me a 4. Now that completes the square, and look, I've already factored it. If I add 4 to one side, I have to add 4 to the other side, and 6 and 4 is 10. At this point, I have to take the square root of each side. That gives me x minus 2 equals, now I don't know the square root of 10, so I'm just going to leave it plus or minus square root of 10. Now I have this minus 2. Since I can't really, I guess I could take this and make it a positive square root of 10 and a negative square root of 10, but we have a little bit easier way of doing that. I'm going to add 2 to each side. Now that 2 likes to go in the front. So the answer is 2 plus the square root of 10 and 2 minus the square root of 10. And the way you can write that is just 2 plus or minus the square root of 10. Other people you may see may just, write it like this, 2 plus the square root of 10 and 2 minus the square root of 10. But I'm okay with that, and it's the easier way to write it. All right, I would like you to write this one down and try to do it by yourself as long as you can, and then come back to me when you've given it a good shot. All right, welcome back. Let's see, I have x squared plus 10x plus blank because I'm going to complete the square. I put my blanks on both sides. Now I'm going to factor it, and I know it's going to go into that form because I'm going to make it. I'm going to complete the square so that it works. Half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So I'm going to add 25 to each side. The left side is already factored. I've completed the squared and made it work out. Negative 9 and 25 is 16. Take the square root of each side, and that gives me x plus 5 equals plus or minus 4. Now, if you forget that plus or minus 4, you're basically done. So make sure that you don't forget that. Now, I'm going to show you two ways to do this one. I can break it into two parts and go x plus 5 equal 4, x plus 5 equal negative 4. Subtract 5 from each side, and x equals negative 1. Subtract 5 from each side, and x equals negative 9. So your answers would be negative 1 and negative 9. For you guys who don't like to show that much work, you could do it this way as well. And you're probably going to see me do it this way more often. Right here, I don't technically have to switch it into two parts. I could just subtract 5 from each side and now work out the plus and the minus 4. Positive 4 take away 5 is negative 1. Negative 4 take away 5 is negative 9. You get the same answer. It's a little bit less work, but some of you girls I know like to separate it out and show your work. So you can do it either way you like. Okay, Now, I believe this is the last example. Please, please, please try to do this one all the way down by yourself. Turn me off, and when you come back on, I will be waiting. Bye. Don't forget to come back. All right, the first thing we have to do on this problem is to take the -5 and move it over to the other side. Remember, for complete the square, you always have to equal c. That gives me t squared minus 8t. I'm going to leave my blank to complete the square. And the -5 turns into a +5. And I'm going to leave my blank to complete the square. Now I'm going to have t minus, and I'm going to take 8. Half of 8 is 4. Square the 4. That gives me a 16. And I add 16 to each side. Go ahead and add these together. That's a 21. What's the next step? Yep, you're right. Take the square root of each side, and I get t minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 21. I'm going to add 4 to each side. Remember that the 4 likes to go in the front, so that's 4 plus or minus the square root of 21. Now, if you need a list of steps in order to do this, this is a little bit longer list of steps, but this does work if you want to write all of this down, or you could cut it out and put it in your notebook. That's all I have for you tonight, Bearcats, and I will see you bright and early on Monday morning. Have a great Sunday afternoon. Bye-bye.